Hello friends, welcome to IAS YouTube channel. This session is a part of our quick revision series PRELIMS ATULya. And in today's session we are starting the modern history. We have already covered the medieval history, and in today's session we'll discuss about economic effects of the British rule. So let's get started. Now friends, the British relationship with India, it was more of a political subordination. So economic exploitation formed the core of this relationship. So this process of colonization, it was done keeping in mind the benefit of the mother country. So in this session, we'll analyze the aspects of economic exploitation within the process of colonization. So first we'll discuss the first phase, then second phase, and then third phase. So the first phase, it was a direct plunder, and it dated from 1757 when the British East India Company acquired the rights to collect revenue. So the British set up their first factory on the banks of Hooghly River. So this Hooghly River, it is in Bengal, and they set up their first factory there. Now the company had managed to acquire permits, or we can call these permits dastak, from the Mughal emperor, and these dastaks exempted them from having to pay duties on their trade. So this led to a great deal of corruption among the employees of the company. Now this farman was widely misused by them for their private trade. So it also meant heavy losses in revenue for the Bengal governors in a way of custom duties. So this became a contentious issue and one of the chief factors which led to the Battle of Plassey, which was fought in 1757. Now let's try to analyze the land revenue policies during the British Empire. So after the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha, the maximization of revenue was the primary objective of the British administration, and agricultural taxation was the main source of income for the company. So in 1793, Cornwallis introduced the system of permanent settlement, and under this system, Jamidars, who earlier only had the right to collect revenues, were established as owners of land. So the estate's demand for land revenue was permanently fixed, but if Jamidars were unable to pay the full tax, then their lands would be taken away and auctioned by the state. So this was the permanent settlement. Again, I would like to repeat that it was introduced in 1793 and it was introduced by Lord Cornwallis. Now let's try to know about Raiyatwari system. So here you have to understand that this system, it was introduced in Madras Presidency. So later it was introduced in the Bombay too, but initially it was introduced in Madras Presidency, and it was started by Alexander Reed in 1798. So permanent settlement, it was introduced by Lord Cornwallis, and Raiyatwari system, it was started by Alexander Reed. So do not get confused. So under this system, revenue was initially collected from each village separately, and then each cultivator was assessed individually under this system. Now we'll discuss about Mahawadi system. So this system was introduced in the north and northwest of India. So under this system, settlements with village community were made. So each such fiscal unit was called a mahal. So under this system, some recognition was given to collective owners' rights. Now let's try to analyze the land revenue policies. So as a result of the revenue policies of the British, agriculture stagnated and peasants almost became tenants at will. Now let's move to second phase of the British colonialism. So this second phase is generally seen to have begun with Charter Act of 1813. So because of this Charter Act of 1813, company lost its monopoly trading rights in India. And this second phase, it ended in 1858, when the British Crown took over the direct control and administration of all British territory in India. So you have to understand one thing here, that as the company's profits grew, the support they enjoyed from the British government became precarious. So many members of the parliament, I'm talking about British Parliament, had East Indian interests, and they used company's resources to maintain their patronage within the government. Now, in a bid to acquire a greater control over company's earnings, the British Parliament started attacking individual company officials with charges of misconduct. So these free traders were dominating in the parliament, and they started demanding free access to India. And this led to passing of Charter Act of 1813. And this act ended the monopoly enjoyed by the company in India. Okay, so this is how this Charter Act of 1813 was enacted. Now let's try to understand the reason behind the commercialization of agriculture. So from the 1860s onwards, the nature of agricultural production was determined by the demands of the overseas market for Indian primary products. So the item exported in the first half of the 19th century included cash crops like indigo, opium, cotton and silk. Now, this commercialization seems to have been a forced artificial process and it led to very limited growth in the agriculture sector. So, the lack of any simultaneous large scale industrial development meant that accumulated agrarian capital had no viable channels of investment. Okay, so there wasn't any investment in the field of agriculture. So, the larger part of the profits generated by the exports trade went to British business houses, which controlled shipping and insurance industries. So, those who benefited in the colony were big farmers, some Indian traders, and moneylenders. So, this commercialization intensified the feudal structure of landlord moneylender exploitation in rural areas. So this so-called process of commercialization, it was supposed to lead to a capitalist agriculture, but that didn't happen. Here you must know about Indigo Rebellion in 1859-60. So white planters had to force farmers to grow indigo because it yielded low profits and upset the harvesting cycles. So farmers were forced to grow cash crops also because they had to pay the high revenue rent and debts in cash. Now, this revenue maximization and limited famine relief in extreme situations were the factors that motivated the public investment, and it led to great prosperity and commercial agriculture, especially in Punjab. And here I would like to highlight about the construction of railways. Now, this construction of railways further strengthened the colonial nature of India's economic development. So, the Industrial Revolution in Europe enabled the mass production of cheap machine made goods which flooded Indian markets. Now let's try to know about the third phase of British colonialism. So this third phase is seen to have begun from the 1860s when British India became part of the ever expanding British Empire. Now this period, it can be characterized as the period under finance imperialism. So some British capital was invested in the colony. Finally, it happened. Some investment was made, and this capital was organized through a closed network of British banks, export-import firms, and managing agencies. Now, the third phase was merely a consolidation of trends that were already witnessed clearly in the second phase. So it may be more useful to study these phases as heavily overlapping, where new and more subtle forms of exploitation existed. Now, high tariff restrictions in other developing capitalist countries led to a contraction of markets for British manufactured goods, and the need for heavy imports of agricultural products in Britain was making her position vulnerable in trade with other countries. So, India proved crucial in solving the problem of Britain's deficits. So, Britain's control over India ensured that there would always be a captive market for textiles. So, India's export surplus in raw material with countries other than Britain counterbalanced her deficits everywhere. Now, let's discuss about the drain of wealth theory. So, early Indian nationalists like Dadabhai Naoroji, M.G. Ranade, and R.C. Dutt, they had expected Britain to undertake capitalist industrialization in India, but they were deeply disillusioned with the results of colonial industrial policies. So, according to them, poverty in India was the result of a steady drain of Indian wealth in Britain. So, this drain was a small fraction of the value of India's total export. If this had been invested in the country, it could have helped generate a surplus to build a capitalist economy. So let me just summarize what we have learned. So this phased economic exploitation of colony was the core motive for the British to establish their rule in the Indian subcontinent. So the nature of this exploitation changed over the course of their reign owing to changes within Britain. and these in turn had specific economic, social, and political consequences for the colony. So most economic initiatives undertaken by British was simply taken in the name of development and modernization, but they had a different impact on the colony, and this led to backwardness rather than growth. And finally, most of these initiatives helped exploit the resources of the country to enable industrialization in Europe. So that's all we wanted to discuss in this session. If you have liked our initiative, you can subscribe our YouTube channel for more such videos. And as I said, these sessions related to modern history are very important. If it is possible, create your short notes. And if you do not have the time, simply download this PPT and keep revising these notes, because prelims is around the corner and revision is going to be the key now. So that's all for today's session. I'll see you in the next session soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.